Welcome to Flyover Conservative Podcast with David and Stacy Whited, where we break down current events and examine culture through the lens of conservative Christian values.
Consequences. We're going to dive into that today. I don't know anybody that can kind of cover this from multiple areas, from the medical to the travel to airlines. He's a former chiropractor. He's a Delta airline pilot. He's also the vice president of USFreedomFlyers, Mr. Kevin Stillwagon.
Yay!
Hey, thanks for having me. And just for the record, I'm a retired Delta Airlines captain, and that was not by choice. I was forced to retire early because I refused to comply with their mandates. And I absolutely love the name of your show, Flyover, but we're not gonna fly over today. We're gonna stop and take a 40,000 foot view of this and see what's really going on.
Yeah.
The problem with what's going on in the FAA right now is they're flying over, they got their blinders on, they're not paying attention, and basically they're sitting on their hands with their fingers crossed, hoping that we don't have a disaster.
Let's dig into that, because there's obviously a lot of our listeners, they do fly across the country into other states or other continents even, and so when you're looking at this, it's like, okay, how safe is traveling, and what is going on with the pilots?
Well, let me ask you this question to lead into this. Can a pilot stop at the bar before he gets on his plate? He's got a little bit of time and have a few margaritas before he flies? Great
question.
Is that frowned on, or is that okay? Do they have a lot of liberty to do what they want to do with that?
There's absolutely no liberty there whatsoever.
Why would they not allow that?
Because it impairs your judgment and your reaction time, and the same thing can happen with wearing a mask for a prolonged period of time. And that's exactly why I was kicked out of the airline, because I refused to put that mask on. And here's what's really interesting. The FAA is required to make a statement on anything that could affect flight safety. It took them 4 years after the mask mandate came out. And I'll just say that the FAA did not mandate masks, nor did they regulate them, but they just let the TSA and the airlines impose masks on all crew members, passengers, anybody getting on an airplane. So just the other day, they came out with a document titled Safety Implications of Respiratory Protection Mask Wear. And they admit that there is a problem. That it can be a problem affecting reaction times and ability to concentrate and think. So, and another thing that just happened recently was the FAA has to get recertified every 5 years by Congress. And this just happened a couple of weeks ago. And they put in the reauthorization proceedings that the FAA shall not mandate mask wear for any crew members or any passengers. And they shall not mandate any shots for COVID-19 for any crew member or passengers. And so this is why we have the organization called USFreedomFlyers.org. We want everyone who is interested in aviation safety, and that would include anybody who steps on an airplane. We want you to join US Freedom Flyers, so that you can see what we're up to. We're trying to make some huge changes in the way the FAA has been dealing with some of these situations that have recently come up. And in order to do that, we need a lot of support. We need a lot of people behind us. You don't have to donate. There's no charge to join, but if you can donate, that would be great. And your benefit of joining is to get in on our newsletter chain and see what we're up to. We're trying to make some demonstrable changes at the governmental level and also within the FAA, so that the ridiculousness that happened with COVID-19 never happens again. And believe me, it could happen again.
Well, especially as we're hearing about bird flu and everything that they're talking about now of what could potentially be coming out. Obviously, it's an election year. We're 165 days from the 2024 election, so you never know what's going to come down the pike.
They're hyping up the bird flu, and then in the same articles that all the doctors are saying, but we could quickly have a vaccine available like this to counteract that. So they're already kind of pitching like, hey, there's a lot of nails in the road, but that's okay. We already got patches for the tires, and we got new tires for you. Like they're kind of working hand in
And we
hand.
can't forget, I remember being on planes and how ridiculous they were about masks. And obviously, we all
Yeah,
saw videos of people being pulled off of planes that were refusing to wear masks. It was a
right.
crazy time. What are you finding with pilots that were required to get the vaccination? Are they having side effects, and is that an issue for flights?
They are having side effects, and this is a huge issue. I did my own research on this, and I found that there is a 40% increase of pilots that are dying before the normal age of retirement, which is the age of 65. And this 40% increase happened starting in January of 2021, right after the mandatory shot rolled out. And so we're seeing that, and we're also seeing a 300% increase in the numbers of pilots that are going out on long-term disability for various reasons. And these include heart problems, neurological problems, and all of these things can definitely be tied to known adverse reactions of this shot that they knew well ahead of time before it even rolled out. They published a list of adverse events of special interest. Myocarditis was on there, neurological problems were on there. So they knew this. Now, why would the FAA come out and make a statement that it's safe for pilots and air traffic controllers to get these shots when it was already in the literature that it could create problems that could cause a pilot to lose their ability to hold a medical certificate, which means they can't fly an aircraft of any kind, even a small Cessna. Why would they do that? So, see, we need to have some congressional hearings. We need to get the Aviation Safety Subcommittee to put the people that were in charge of the FAA at the time, both on the medical side and the non-medical side, and we need to figure out, why did you do this? Why did you go against your internal documents that clearly say you can't put an experimental product into a pilot? And not only that, but even after any drug or medical procedure gets FDA approval, they recommend waiting a full year before pilots start taking it. And the reason is because there might be some adverse reactions that happen in what's called post-marketing experience. Supposedly all of these drugs and vaccines go through a testing period, but it's never long enough to determine if something could happen down the road that could affect flight safety. And so that's their guidance, and they directly went against that. We got to figure out who made the decision, why did they do that, hold them accountable, and make sure this never, ever happens again.
It's interesting. Is there an increased impact or level of risk for a pilot compared to somebody on the ground that drives a forklift, drives a bus?
Great question.
Is there increased demands on the body that make that profession at a higher risk than other professions?
With the changes in altitude and cabin pressure, yes, that's a possibility. And this is something that needs to be fully investigated. I just gave you the example of the FAA coming out and making a statement about the forced mask wear, that, yeah, this could have safety implications. But they never really did their own testing on this. All they did was they looked at studies that were already in print, and they made some comments on that. And they admit that, yeah, it could be a problem, but we need to go further. We need to test this at various cabin altitudes, things of that nature. That was not done. And it hasn't been done with the shot yet either, but it needs to be done. And that's what we're saying. You need to do some testing on this, and you also need to start screening pilots right now for subtle things that could be happening in their physiology that could be hiding the possibility of myocarditis or the possibility of a seizure. Now, I can tell you that flying is still safe. It's very, very safe. All pilots are trained for the incapacitation of the other pilot. If either pilot goes unconscious, the other pilot is fully capable of taking over control of the aircraft and landing it safely and getting it to the gate. That's normally not a problem. Where the real problem happens is when you get unexpected full flight control input that would go into an aircraft system, like the rudder pedals, for example, that the other pilot will not be able to overcome. And this will cause an accident. It's happened in the past, and we just recently had a pilot go into a full seizure. This was in November, this past November. It was an American Airlines flight coming into the Philadelphia airport from Paris, and they were on final approach, and the first officer, who was the flying pilot at the time, went into a full tonic seizure. His body went completely rigid, and his legs went underneath the rudder pedals. Luckily, it did not put an unexpected full flight control input into the rudder pedals, but had it done that, the other pilot would have had a significant problem trying to regain control of the aircraft. This has happened before. It happened at an American Airlines flight taking off out of the JFK airport, where the first officer, although he was not incapacitated, the first officer put in an inappropriate full rudder input, and it caused the aircraft to crash. It also happened in Pittsburgh with a US Air flight on final approach. And they still haven't figured out if it was a pilot that put an unexpected full flight control input into the rudders that the other pilot couldn't overcome, or it may have been a flight control failure. They haven't completely figured that out yet. But I can tell you, with my 33 years of flying large jet aircraft for major airlines, if you put in a full unexpected input into the rudder pedals, you cannot overcome that with the ailerons. And unless the other pilot can get that person off the rudder pedal, that aircraft is going to have control problems, and it will probably crash. Yeah, so this is a big deal.
It is a huge deal. So you have that aspect of it. And then like we do fly quite a bit. And one thing I've noticed that seems to have changed since 2020, 2021 is the amount of flights that are delayed due to waiting for the crew. Is that because they've lost so many people because they either wouldn't get the vaccination or they have possibly died? What is causing these issues, do you believe?
Yeah, there is a staffing problem right now. They really haven't given us an explanation as to why that is. But when the COVID nonsense happened, and you remember this, I was flying airplanes literally from coast to coast that were empty. And so the airlines started grounding aircraft, parking them in the desert, and laying off a lot of crew members. They gave them early retirement packages. And so, those pilots and flight attendants are all gone now. And so when the demand for flying came roaring back, and it came back a lot faster than they anticipated, well, now they're behind the eight ball trying to get qualified crew members into those seats. And that's a hard thing to do. And I can tell you guys that, training to proficiency is not a good idea in the airline industry. You want to have people in that cockpit that have a lot of experience. I mean, lots of it. You can't just take a person that's green right off the street and give them a stack of papers to study and stick them in a simulator and see if they can land the airplane, and then stick them in an airplane with 300 passengers and expect them to be able to react appropriately if something goes horribly wrong. It won't. They don't have the experience, you see. So
that's a great point,
kind of the situation that we're in right now.
Especially when you're seeing even what's going on with malfunctions of the planes, with the whole thing with Boeing and almost like DEI type things. It's like, okay, do you see that being a problem in the future? Have you done much research on that?
Yeah, that is a problem. And, the FAA was without an administrator for quite a long time after the administrator that was in charge when the COVID thing happened. He resigned under pressure. But it was just this last October of 2023 that we finally got a new FAA administrator, Michael Whitaker. And he was grilled by Congress. And he admitted that, yeah, it's a culture problem at some of these aircraft manufacturers that they really need to start looking into. So, yeah.
There's a lot of, I can't think of a three-letter agency that the American people have a ton of trust in. If you want to go down the list, forget, FBI, CIA, forget that stuff. Just, the EPA. I don't know. People say, well, I could sleep good at night. Those guys are doing good work. The FDA. I don't know that we go to bed at night thinking, the FDA, they got my back. I don't even have to think about what I put in my mouth. I know that they're losing sleep over what's best for my health. I don't know if there's any three-letter agency that people, just wrap their arms around and say, thank you, for this. There's overreach and problem. And when they start getting involved in creating policy that doesn't make sense, if I'm going in for a surgery, I could care less what the religion or color or anybody else is of the person put me under. I want their competency to be high. And when it comes to getting on a flight, like I want to get on, hey, that guy looks like he knows what he's doing, and then go back and, have a Coke and rest or whatever, and not be
because
thinking,
that's all you could do.
Because that's I want to make sure, hey, that they got the best person in there, and then he's protected as much as humanly possible to be able to be healthy. Whether he's virtue signaling for an experimental medication or not, and they're meeting a quota that, hey, we got the numbers up. Whether, there was silliness in all of it. I listened to Aaron Rodgers with Tucker Carlson this last weekend. He's talking about in the NFL, you had to wear a separate band and you had to get tested every day if you didn't do the vaccine protocol. These guys are out in the field tackling each other and covered in sweat. Yeah. But then they come to the side, they put on a mask. And there was just so much silliness that, you kind of feel like, they've left science behind. That's what I kind of opened with, the idea of leaving science behind. When you do that, though, and you're doing it for ulterior motives, whether it's a DEI issue or being able to brag, we got 92% compliance among all whatever your profession is. It creates a problem when science isn't questioned, and then now you're kind of involved in sort of the cleanup and kicking over the rocks with it.
Right. And, the science has been wrong on this for a really, really long time. The science says that if you inject a foreign protein into the body, that you'll get antibodies. Well, that's absolutely true. You will. I could take dirt out of my backyard, put it in a syringe with saline and inject it, and I'm going to get antibodies. That's what the immune system does. But where they got mixed up was they thought that, okay, well, if we just inject parts of pathogenic organisms, just parts of that into the body, that it will create antibodies that will protect us against infection. No, that is absolutely not true. And it's always been that way for every shot called a vaccine, with two minor exceptions. One was the oral polio vaccine, which was the entire virus, the whole thing, all of it. And the other was the rotavirus vaccine. It was the whole thing. It was the whole virus in an oral product that you swallowed. And it came through what's called the epithelial barrier in a natural way, the way that you would normally be infected by either polio or the rotavirus. And by doing so, your immune system gets to experience all of that organism, the whole thing. And it builds up a memory and antibodies that are robust that will be able to protect you from future infections. And it secretes a very special antibody into the mucosal layer that does protect you from future infections. But when you take something and you inject it into the body, totally ignoring that epithelial barrier, you're creating something inside the body that can only react to future infections. It will never prevent an infection, never, ever. Birx admitted it. Fauci admitted it now, you see. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but the antibodies that are created are suboptimal because they're only injecting part of it.
Right.
Those antigens get mutated. They change. And so now the antibodies that you have are only looking for what is injected into you, not what really exists, you see. And it doesn't work. Man. So my job as an educator is to make this plain, pure, and simple for people to really think about this. What they're doing does not work, and we need to stop following their ridiculous mandates. We're just not going to do it anymore.
So let's go to USFreedomFlyers.org. So you're the vice president of US Freedom Flyers. Tell us about the organization. What do you guys do?
Well, the organization was originally formed by Josh Yoder and several of his colleague pilots at his airline, because they saw that the shot was going to be mandated at some airlines, and they thought, well, we got to stop this immediately. And so they started filing lawsuits against airlines that had, in fact, mandated the shot. And at that time, it was United Airlines and Atlas Airlines. They absolutely mandated the shot for all pilots. If you didn't get the shot, you didn't get to go to work. But at many other airlines, like the airline that I was at, Delta Airlines, they did not mandate the shot. They coerced it, though. They fully encouraged all of their pilots to get the shot. In fact, they paid them incentives if they did get it, and they penalized them financially if they did not get the shot. You see, all of these activities, they're not legal. You can't be doing this to your employees. And, people ask me all the time, and Josh and I were just talking about this on the phone the other day. People say, well, if they mandate the shot at your airline, well, just go to an airline that doesn't mandate the shot. Well, that doesn't work that way when you're a pilot. You cannot make a lateral move as a pilot. Even though you're very, very experienced and have 30 years, if you go to a different airline, you have to start over again right at the bottom.
Wow.
Your pay is cut by like 75%.
That's prohibitive.
Yeah. So, pilots are not willing to do that. They want to stay at the airline that they're with and have a good, long-lasting career. So you can see that the pressure that's put on these pilots to get this shot was huge. And there are many, many pilots that did it, and now they fully regret it because they are having side effects, they're having symptoms, they're having tiredness, they're having fatigue, they're getting heart palpitations, so we need to start looking into this.
We
Definitely.
appreciate the work that you're doing and bringing attention to this and create an organization where people aren't just flapping in the breeze alone. They have something that they can join and get, another source of information. Like you said, it's free to join. You can get the newsletter and get in that loop. And I'm sure it's good for pilots, everybody from, somebody flying a Cessna that's certified to probably, former military or everybody in between. This is something they can be a part of.
And then before we let you go, just real fast, Kevin. So when people donate, I just want them to know, where does that money go and what is that for? What are they donating to?
Well, it's going to be mainly for lawsuits. We have to bring some lawsuits against the FAA to hold them accountable for what was done, and also to prevent this from happening in the future. We're also probably going to have some litigation against individual airlines that did mandate the shot and have lost employees over that. So we'll be going after them as well. But our main focus right now is on the FAA.
That's great. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for everything that you're doing to help to get this information out, because I know it's a concern for a lot of Americans. So thank you for everything that you all are doing at USFreedomFlyers.org. We really appreciate it.